Good morning, everyone. I'm John O'Loughlin. Welcome to my channel. It's called McDuff Lives. And this morning I am interviewing Amber Connor, who's been a subscriber, follower of George Webb and the Team W effort for some time now. I first encountered her when George was down in Atlanta doing a charrette, and really enjoyed talking to her around the campfire. Those of you that were with us will remember that as a very, very special evening. So without further ado, let's welcome Amber Connor to the show. Good morning, Amber.
Hello, John. How are you?
I'm fine, Amber. I detect in your voice, and as you said to me before the show, you've got a little bit lingering of the flu. And
Correct.
so we'll forgive you for not having your pristine vocal voice as we enjoyed when you sang for us the last time. But I hope you're feeling all right.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, good. And well, you had an interesting encounter with the medical profession recently with regard to your son. And since that's important both to you and to the rest of us as to how things are getting diagnosed these days, just as a preface, I noticed that many people have reported that while COVID has been on the rise, that the flu has practically disappeared from statistics. And you have a little insight to share on that, if you would.
Yes. So we all know flu and cold season comes around the fall each year. And we sat down as husband and wife, and we decided, since one of our children were at school, that if he felt under the weather, or if one of us seemed to fall under the weather, that before we went straight to a COVID test, we would test for what you would normally get during this time of year. And especially with children, we would request a strep test and a flu test first. And then if those came back negative, then we would have a discussion on whether we wanted to test for COVID or if we wanted to just hunker down for 10 to 14 days. And so when we took our child to school around noon, the nurse called, said, "Hey, he's got a fever. He said he's not very hungry." I said, "Okay, we'll just come and get him." So we came to get him. We called his pediatrician, who's a wonderful, we have a Orthodox Jewish pediatrician who's very understanding, very open to, say it's time for his vaccination. If we say we want to spread him out, do one, wait a while, do another, wait a while, he'll work with us. So we let him know his symptoms. We said, "Hey, this is what he's experiencing." He said he's got a little bit of a headache, but you can get that with the flu or COVID. What we would like to do, I said, "I'm not so worried about testing for COVID. I would like to test for the flu. And I would really like to get a strep test, because if I just go straight to COVID, which has, we all have a little coronavirus in our system. And if the tests have a really high positive rate, I don't want to sit there and not be able to address with antibiotics if he has something like strep, because that could cause a lot of severe consequences if you're not on top of it." And the same with the flu, where I might not give children's cold and flu meds or do the things I normally would and just wait, and then pneumonia could set in. So I wanted to go ahead and get those two tests, and it came back that he didn't have strep, but he had a low-grade flu, which it had just begun. So then we knew exactly what to do. Lots of vitamin C, lots of vitamin D, zinc, chicken broth, lots of cuddles and snuggles. And I knew the minute I did that, I would catch it. But it was more about getting him better, and it would make me feel better, and we would be able to fare better. So then, of course, I passed it to my 9-year-old, who then passed it to his father. And with the kids, it lasted between 24 and 48 hours. And with my husband and I, it's been around 72 hours, a little bit longer, just because we're older. But we were able to keep it out of our chest and address it as if we're trying to stop pneumonia, instead of just saying, "Oh, it must be COVID," and sitting around and letting it build up and get worse.
So you didn't need to go with antibiotics then?
No, because he didn't have strep. And if anything, we would have done a Z-Pack. But when I noticed that it was leaving my youngest by 48 hours, I thought, well, it'll build mine and my husband's immune system a bit to have our bones hurt a little bit. Our white blood cells will be kicking in, and it'll give it a little workout, since I knew it was the flu and not something like COVID.
Well, one thing I think people be interested in is, aside from we hope that everybody's recovered in the next couple of days, but when you said that you decided to test for flu and streptococcus first, most parents wouldn't have thought of that. I wonder if you got some medical education or if you just been studying this, and how did that go with the doctor conversation? In other words, did the doctor give you options first, or did you come in with your options already lined up and telling the doctor what to do, more or less?
Well, the reason why we tend to choose, whether they're Christian, Jewish, Muslim, we tend to choose doctors who have faith, is because they don't rely on their own ideals and they don't push a science narrative, especially, and they care about what their patients are thinking because they care about, maybe God is working through someone they're talking to, or maybe it's a conversation they need to have as believers, and they kind of work with one another. So I've always found that those doctors who have faith and aren't afraid to pray with you are also the same ones that will listen to you when you have worries. He had said, "Hey, why don't you come in and get a COVID test?" And I, as soon as I said, "Well, if it comes back positive, there's nothing we can do about it but sit here," correct? He said, "Yes, correct." And I said, "But if we don't test for other things first and it comes back as a positive because there's a little coronavirus, or it might come back coronavirus, but we might have the flu, or he might have something else compounding with it. We're not checking for that. Can we check for the other things first? Because those are things we would be able to medicate. We would be able to do something other than just sit around." And he said, "Sure, no problem." He said, "We may not want to stress out your little one. We may want to hit it all at the same time. So he might have to do a strep test and then a flu test and a COVID test." We said, "Oh, okay, that's fine." Because our big thing was we want to test for strep first, flu second. And then if both came back negative, okay, well, we might need a test for COVID. That would just be because we wouldn't want to go out in the public and infect anybody else. And so as soon as he did the flu test, it came back almost immediately that it was a low grade flu. And he said, "We don't need to do the COVID test. We need to treat it as the flu because that's what it is. And even if it was COVID, there was nothing that you'll be able to do." So he's very sensible, always has been. And, that's why we keep going to him.
I can't imagine not testing for streptococcus when you have similar systems like that, because as you said, if it's not treated, it can be deadly.
Yes.
And before we had antibiotics, it was deadly. And, that happened a lot in the first half of the 20th century. And, so medicine is a blessing. We're glad we do have the antibiotics and the results of a lot of testing that's gone on in the past. And I guess that's one of the problems that we have with this COVID vaccine is how much testing could you have done in 2 months? Not sufficient to convince me that it's safe. But then I am not an expert, and I shouldn't even make any comments about it if I want to keep my YouTube channel. So
Yeah.
I won't say any more about my opinion of it. But I'm very appreciative of your sharing your information about what happens with your kids, and hopefully that will help other people, because you got to test for streptococcus if you have those symptoms, and also the very idea of testing for flu. I I mean, I wouldn't have even thought of that. Of course, I don't have kids right now, but if I did, I probably would have thought of it. But because you know how you think about other people more than yourself, but to um, to actually confront the medical profession generally, to say, hey, do you guys, as an AMA, do you all have a protocol for people to come in saying, they've got a fever and maybe some symptoms in the upper respiratory tract? Do you have a protocol? Do you have a way to test whether it's flu versus COVID? And it seems like you've succeeded in doing that on your own. So that's great. And once again, we wish your kids and your husband well, quick recovery, and all that stuff. Let's ask you a little bit more about your interesting life. I know that you are a singer and you sing with, is it the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra? Do I have
The,
that right?
the Georgia Symphony Orchestra.
The Georgia Symphony
Yes.
Orchestra, and
Yes.
you are a soprano, I guess.
First soprano, yes. But I've been a second alto as well. I've got a pretty good range. I think it's the second soprano where I transition from chest to throat. I really have to focus a lot, and that can be something where I have to really practice. But especially when I had my first child, my voice changed from first soprano to second alto. And it was the strangest thing. I don't know if it had to do with pushing on my diaphragm, how I was breathing, but we all got a kick out of it in the chorus of me moving from all my friends in the first soprano section and going into the alto section, and then all making jokes back and forth, and then ending up after I had my second child back in the first soprano section.
That's fun. Yeah, I love singing, and I've sung in choruses in choirs and stuff before I started doing opera roles, and I really did. And there's some great feeling that you get from singing with a big group of people. It's not about you. It's about this huge sound that you're just a part of, and it feels so good. I had a great pleasure of singing the Brahms Requiem over in Vienna, Austria, one summer, and just people from all over the world were there singing. Most of us didn't have German as a native language, and yet we were all thrown in it together, and we accomplished it, and it just felt terrific. Um, as Now that's the Georgia Symphony Orchestra, Andy, that you've got up there, and I think that might be a different orchestra.
Yeah, that's us. And
Oh, that's you. Okay.
yes, correct. And there's this one video that I really love. It's where we sang Georgia on My Mind, but we did it virtually. So it was very difficult. It was our first time, and everyone recorded it at home by themselves. And then our conductor, the guy you see there, Tim Verve, he put it all, the virtual chorus 360. He put it all together, and we had no idea how it would turn out, and it turned out really great. So that was a positive spin on the fact that everyone was having cabin fever.
Is it on YouTube, or is it up there
Yes, it
somewhere
is.
we can
It
see it?
is.
Probably not too long. Maybe we could play it. Oh, there it is.
Georgia, Georgia, the day through, just an old sweet song keeps Georgia on my mind. Georgia on my mind. Georgia, Georgia. A song for you comes as sweet and clear as moonlight through the wind's moon. Other arms reach out to me, other eyes smile tenderly. Still
All right, Georgia. Well, isn't that something? I really enjoyed that, and but I was wondering where the guys are. How come there wasn't any guys in the picture?
So it's a 360. So that you saw arrows at the top, you could actually turn and see
Uh-huh.
the whole choir as it goes all the way around. So the guys are in there. You just, because
Hmm.
it was just set in that one section, it actually shows the whole choir. It was the first time that a choir had done virtual and a 360 at the same time. So it was, we had no idea what our conductor was talking about when he said, this is what it's going to look like. But then it was really cool because as you were watching it, you could kind of turn the video and see everyone.
I see. Interesting. Well, that's great. How many voices in your chorus there?
120.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Oh boy, that's a nice big size. And now, when I used to sing in choir, there was a guy, Robert Shaw from Atlanta, was very
Yes.
famous. And I don't know if you've ever. Is he passed on now or?
He has. And actually, our choral director, Brian Black, he studied under Shaw. He used to sing in the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra. In fact, a lot of the people that are in the chorus, they're either university professors at Kennesaw State or they teach music. And it's kind of a way where we all gave up a long time ago of making a lot of money in choral music. But just the fact that it's a wonderful hobby and it's a great way to spend time together and to share, our talent. So a lot of people, they either studied under Shaw, knew him, or went to plenty of those concerts and had
Mhm.
lots of memories from that.
One more memory of mine was Alice. I can't remember Alice's last name. She was his assistant for many years, and she did a lot of arrangements of shape note singing. I, have you run into that yet? Any? She arranged a lot of the great old shape note songs from the early, from the Great Awakening and the Second Great Awakening. You look like you haven't run into that yet, but I can't remember
No.
Alice Parker. That's her name, Alice
Okay.
Parker, a great arranger and leader herself, who I had the pleasure of singing with one weekend for a workshop.
I'll definitely
So enough
ask.
enough about me and my vocal career. As you said, I mean, chorus singing is something. It's a labor of love. It comes from the heart. There's no way you're going to get paid anything. I mean, if you get paid anything at all, it might be enough to park at the gig. If you go to the singing, I've sing at the Kennedy Center many times, and the main issue is, are you going to pay for the parking?
Yeah. You get to just say that you sang there, which is a great honor to be able to sing at some of these places and to actually bring smiles to people's faces. We actually do a concert for children with autism, and we allow for them to come in and make as much noise as they want, wander around, and their parents sometimes will end up crying because they can never take their kid anywhere because people get annoyed. They ask like, why isn't your child calming down? And it's so soothing for them. And a lot of times they'll be standing at the base of the stage, like clapping and kind of moving to the music. And a lot at once the concert's over and they go into the lobby, we do like a instrument petting zoo, so they can actually go and touch the instruments. And we've seen many times where parents were leaving and they were crying and wanting to stay. So, I mean, we did it all the way up until COVID. I think we were on our 5th year, and it was really difficult to not do it this year because it had become a tradition, and the smiles that it brought to parents' faces who don't ever have that ability was, and to sing and watch just the joy it brings. And sometimes they would sing along. They would sit on top of the back part of the chair and sway back and forth or clap their hands. And the guys in the radio booth would make it to where we would only hear one another, so we could still hear our music and hear the instruments and stay on key. But it would give the freedom of the people in the audience to really enjoy themselves.
That's great, and I'm so glad to hear somebody who's deeply involved in culture and good music, good culture, good connections with other people, and connecting with the past in terms of the vocal music that you sing, and the conductors, and the people that have this ongoing tradition of classical music and classical vocal arts. This is part of, being, I think, a citizen. And being a citizen of a free country is to be able to express yourself, not just as a kind of a toss off, that you can maybe sing a cover song for parties or something, but actually to get into the real deal of singing at a professional level, as I'm sure you do, and you must, in order to be in that great chorus. Um, I want to kind of I want you to take the temperature for me. I want to take a temperature of the folks that you work with, and maybe specifically, if you can, at the symphony chorus. Um, do you all talk about politics, about COVID, about the election, about what's going on now, and what's the sense of Amber Connor's community in terms of what direction the country's headed in, things like that, just generally.
So we probably the ratio of those who are conservative versus liberal in a liberal arts institutions such as classical music, I would say about 20% would be more on the conservative side and 80% are more on the liberal side. So as far as politics go, everyone is very opinionated. And we have a chorus Facebook page, and that's to share music memes and like just really remind each other what we're there for, which is to bring beauty into the world, no matter what side of the aisle we're wanting to bring it from. And the politics are mostly done on our personal Facebook pages. I'm one of those that if I don't like what someone's saying on their Facebook page, I scroll past it. I don't get in their personal space and tell them why they're wrong or use it as a way to, I consider that browbeating or shoving my opinion down someone's throat, which is never going to change their mind anyway. So I really appreciate learning what everyone is thinking. However, that same ideal is not uh, given to me when I post what I feel. I find that we know in music people are very passionate, and so I forgive them whenever they get very passionate and come onto my page, just because it's something that I don't do. I'm not holding people to the same standard. It's just my standard. And I do expect that people, especially during a time like this, are going to be very emotional. And I think it's cathartic for some people to be able to go in and just, be a Facebook warrior a time or two. I think it fulfills something. For me, I feel like I lost it in translation if I'm berating someone, or if I'm telling them, you're wrong because of this or this. So we have different philosophies, but music is the great healer. And we could be bickering on Facebook and then come together and sing beautifully. And because I don't take that into the practice room, or I'm a very forgiving person. So it's like water off a duck's back. And in fact, sociologically speaking, I really get more of an interest out of what is motivating them to say that, what their fear is, what caused that kind of reaction, than I am about judging the reaction itself. I am human, and sometimes I'll get, oh, I can't believe they just said that on my post. But, after I process it, especially after I sleep and wake up, everything's fine. So, people are passionate. And as citizens, we're not really heard a lot, and we don't really get a platform. And so there's nothing worse than hearing people in the political class or in the intelligence agencies, or like in all of these, like teachers and those who have a platform readily, to mock people who are looking for their own platform, because it's very easy to stand there with your platform and your truth and tell everybody in this, like if you're in the science community, tell everybody what they need to understand, and you have this wonderful platform. But when other people need their platform, they're kind of mocked, or kind of looked down upon. And I feel that really belittles, or it doesn't really show a sign of intelligence from those who do have a platform, who mock people. I think that if they do have an understanding in psychology and in sociology, then they would understand that would, especially in a technological world that they're pushing, as they move jobs overseas and push globalism, and forget about the least of these, who will not have the opportunity to be able to code and to do all these technologically savvy things, as the more manual labor jobs are either transposed to the AI systems or are moved to other countries' poorest. I think that's where they're really showing their lack of understanding a lot of times. So, even though I do forgive, I do hold those who do have a bigger platform a little bit more responsible, because they tend to be a little bit more judgmental, and they're showing individuals and citizens that not only are they judgmental, but they look down upon people and then make fun of them when they're looking for their voice. And then when citizens react in the same manner, they're looked at as the unwashed, or the uncontrollable, or those who, are making it difficult on them. And I think that those in those positions of authority, they need to think about deserving that authority that they find themselves seeking, by having a bigger understanding and a more broad intellectual level, in which they see why people are acting this way. And if they don't want people to act this way, they shouldn't set in motion the things that sociologically and psychologically would cause people to act that way. It's very counterproductive for them. And I feel that it doesn't give people faith in the intelligence they claim to have.
Well, it's extremely divisive language that they use, and where I think I come down on that personally is that it's intentional, that they're not trying to share a common understanding of anything, but rather to be divisive. And so, yeah, let's connect back a little bit. I want to go back to the fireside when we first met with George Webb's uh, uh, reporting and having a charrette down there, and ask you to back up. And how did you end up at a George Webb event like that? Had you been following George? Do you still follow George? And your activism, you stood up, you said something politically that got people's attention. And then, of course, the shooting happened. But without trying not to dwell on that dramatic event or those events, just go back and tell me why it was that you got involved in the first place.
Well, I I've been very disappointed in our media and the things that have been shown on, the tell-a-vision, instead of television. I'm raising children, and I'm trying to raise them to be self-aware and to understand when you're triggered, or when, something is bothering you. Um, don't participate in it, like, leave the situation to maybe, calm yourself, or to uh, process why what you heard just upset you, rather than just have a reaction and spout off at the mouth and just and grow with anger. And I saw our media doing that on a constant basis, not only triggering one another, but when I would then search out what they just told me, 9 times out of 10 it was false. And of course, what did I do? I started to look for truth. And there was nothing better to me than to go to citizens that were complaining about the same thing, because I felt more at home with people who had the same issues than I did listening to the talking heads, who it seemed like they wanted me to hate my neighbor. They wanted me to fear walking out the door. They wanted me to feel guilty about something I said or did or feel, and make other people feel psychologically to psychologically put in their head, everybody hates you, nobody likes you. and you have to fear for everything because everybody's out to get you. That's very damaging. And I noticed that there had to be an ulterior motive. What is this for? And I then started to search, and I was willing to search anywhere and everywhere, because in parenting, I have to be like a mama bear. I had to know what in the world is happening and look for it. And when that happened, I actually stumbled upon your show first, and then what I liked about it is you were reading, and then you were just telling what you got from the passage of something that you just read. And I thought, you know what, people aren't reading enough. And then you had George on one of your broadcasts, and that's when he spoke about politics. And as a child, my dad would have me watch C-SPAN before I'd go to school. I'd watch Washington Journal. He would have me listen to what regular citizens were saying. He would have me watch the how C-SPAN, usually the person answering the phone or talking would have no facial expression. No matter what the person said, they wouldn't make fun. They would just ask a question, let them go. That was it. And it all came back to me when I saw you speaking to George, and then when he was talking about what he put together and how he would look on the internet to search for things. And so I took things that I was personally interested in and started doing compound searches, and just started watching. And then, at one point you were both saying, not everybody, nobody's perfect, and people do make mistakes, but when you're searching for truth, that's going to happen. But, as we search, these things happen, but the things that we know are solid proof, that's what we move with and then keep connecting. And I thought, that's something I need to teach my children, especially when they're like writing book reports or things like that, just to take what is true and build upon that, and just always look for just the facts, Jack, just the facts. And so I found myself being, easily triggered by friends that would say things that they just heard on TV. And I was like, I need to be able to look up facts so that instead of getting upset at them, I'm actually able to just say something that's factual, that kind of just plants a seed or gets them to have a little bit more of a question. And so that's how I kept following and following. And it was right after the election. He was going around talking about voter integrity. And we've had a lot of issues in Atlanta. So, and I've been interested in it since 2016, 2017, when working on a campaign and helping out. I noticed there were a lot of issues, and they were never really addressed by the Secretary of State. And I noticed loopholes. And I also noticed that people on both sides of the aisle, they kind of mess with the rules a little bit. Like a lot of times we talk about voter integrity and voter suppression, but sometimes that word is used purposely, because voter suppression is used when people say you need an ID to vote. And I find it very curious that the same side of the aisle is saying that's voter suppression, but then that same side of the aisle is talking about having you have an ID once you get vaccinated to show that you have. And voting is essential, and it's the foundation of our country. And people died to be able to have the right to vote. I mean, people protested to be able to have the right to vote. And for that to not be taken seriously and to be messed with, I then decided I needed to make my voice heard, and I needed to really dig and do some research so that, we don't keep going down this road of deterioration when it comes to voter integrity.
You have kids in school. Do you send them to public schools? Do you have a private school? How do you deal with that? And are you satisfied with the schools that you've chosen?
Well, my oldest has ADHD, as do I, and we had him in a charter school. And he's a people pleaser as well. He's the firstborn, tends to be a people pleaser. So when he was at the charter school, he was more concentrated on the rules everything was rules. And I would say, "What'd you learn today?" "Well, so and so didn't stand in line on the way to the playground," or "Michelle wasn't sitting on her purple square." And I thought, "Oh, what's going on?" So we had known people at a private school we had worked. We do landscaping as well. I sing in the orchestra, but my husband and I have a landscaping company, and we had been doing the soccer fields for a private school for at least 8 years. And we went to one of the ladies that is the child psychologist there. We told her, "Oh, he's having this issue." She said, "Bring him here." I said, "This is a very expensive school. We can't do that." She said, "We go by tax returns. You guys work here. Bring him here. He needs more of a classical Socratic, with very little rules, because he is a people pleaser, and we'll just work on his focus." So we did that, and then with the second one, we did more of well, he was going to be going to his brother's school, and then the scholarships, because of COVID hit a lot of the older children, the 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. Their parents were finding that one of their parents didn't have a job. And so they were having to apply for some sort of scholarship. So that left 0 scholarships for the younger group. So we sent the second one to, and he's a little bit more rebellious, and he needs a little bit more structure. He does not have ADHD. And so he's a contrarian at heart and very cute at it. I'm very good at it. And so we sent him to a Catholic school that was accepting applications that's just right down the street from that school. So it made it easy for us to go and pick him up. And he's excelling quite well and has turned into this little sweetheart who is very thoughtful, very kind. And, it's done him a world of good. And the contrarian in him, which will, that's just his personality. It's lessened its heaviness. And so we're very pleased, but we're doing virtual right now because of flu season. And just we had the little one in. And after this, when they sent him home, we were like, well, we're going to have him virtual for 2 or 3 weeks and see how he does. And then take him back over there, since the youngest group is not affected as much. But he was able to bring the flu home to us. So him being in school makes parents susceptible when if kids are, carrying germs around.
Okay. It sounds like you've made some good choices, and if they're not going to school, I can't ask my question of whether they have to wear masks or not. So,
Yeah, when the youngest one is in school, they do wear a mask, except when they're eating and playing outside.
okay. I noticed that if you're a professional football player, you don't have to wear your mask during the game. I saw that on TV and I learned something. But if you're standing on the sidelines, you do have to wear a mask. So don't stand on the sidelines without a mask, football players. It's just a word to the wise. Let's talk a little bit about what happened to you and your family at the time of the election. Tempers were high, things were going on, lots of suspicions, and then some shooting happened. How did it happen, and how are you all doing now? Did your kids have any issues about it, and have you been able to put it in the past? Has there been any more investigation, and is it pretty much over, or is there still stuff that we can look forward to learning from this incident?
So I'm kind of known in Atlanta to be very outspoken when it comes to crime and when it comes to issues that are going on in our city. I'm very active when it comes to our local elections. I'm very verbal about who I'm supporting, and I run like it's a crime group, but it's a group of citizens, Concerned Citizens United, where we as citizens, we want to get to know our elected officials. We want to know who's running. We actually we ask questions, and we keep in touch with one another. There's about 6,000 people in the group, and we keep in touch with one another about crimes that are going on, corruption that's going on in the city, and issues that we find, whether it be potholes or someone wanting to do, a big road project, and everyone kind of will give their input. And there's people from the business community in the group. There's people in the political, we have commissioners in there, judges, city council members, Senate and House members. We have media, we have police, we have military. We have a lot of different people in the group. And the way I saw it is we needed to be able to let those who govern us have an actual view of what citizens are thinking and in their raw state. And it's a very private group, but so people in Atlanta know me for that. And they know I was very outspoken about the mayoral election in 2016-17 between Mary Norwood and Keisha Lance Bottoms. And afterwards, she lost two mayoral elections, but each one she lost by 700 votes. Like the number was almost obnoxiously the same, and it was like mockingly the same. So after the second time, I went and searched out some of the addresses and found that there would be 6 people that voted from an empty lot. 6 people or 5 people that voted from an abandoned property. And just on my own in an afternoon, I found like over 60 illegal votes. And that was just from driving around looking at addresses. And then other people in the campaign found that there was definitely a lot of issues and that it should have been challenged. And it was turned into the Secretary of State under an affidavit. And the Secretary of State, it was an open investigation. It's still under an open investigation because it's absolute proof that that election had a lot of issues. And so it was kind of brushed under the rug. And in fact, Mary Norwood was at that time called a racist for challenging the election. And Stacey Abrams herself said that there is no voter fraud in Georgia and that Mary Norwood is a racist for saying that. And anybody who's saying that is wrong. Only to less than 7 or 8 months later come out and say, there's voter fraud. Kemp stole it from us. There's voter fraud in Georgia. And of course, they could have gone to get Mary Norwood's affidavit and how votes are stolen. But they didn't want to because they were actually the ones who wanted Keisha Lance Bottoms in office, and to go and then review over what former complaints about voter integrity questions would then have revealed that the person they supported, there were a lot of questionable things that happened during that election. So it happens on both sides of the aisle because Mary's an independent and the Democrats have complained about voter fraud. And then this last time, the conservatives complained about voter fraud because there is voter fraud. And for me, it's not about the left or the right. It's about right and wrong. And I've seen voter fraud. I know how it happens in Atlanta. And immediately after the election, I started to say, oh, these are the same things that happen every single time, and both parties, there are people in both parties that are guilty of misbehaving, if you know what I mean, and just trying to get the upper hand or claiming victimhood or padding the ballots a bit or making excuses for, well, they didn't have IDs, but we need to go ahead and count them because it's unfair. But everybody has to have an ID to go get liquor, and everybody has to have an ID to do a million other things. But this voting, we're victims in this. But when the tables are turned, and these are the same people who said, all through 2019, Dominion voting machines, they're so horrible, they're horrible, they're horrible. But then this time, oh no, they're great. And so everyone's doing a lot of double speaking out of both sides of their mouth. And I'm not that kind of person. So I became very vocal because it's really about telling the truth. It's not about telling the truth because the person you want to win didn't, or the person you wanted to win won. And so then you kind of negate the truth. And it was quite revealing. I don't know if you read the Time magazine article that came out where they pretty much laid out that it was big corporations working with the very far left and the fringes to make this happen. But what I find really strange is that the very far left, the very people that they were complaining about and rioting about this whole last summer, that made us all very miserable and very scared, and me very, very put out about the whole situation. They teamed up with the actual people that they were complaining about and rioting against, which I find mind blowing. Just whoa, to say we're going to work with the very corporations that we were fighting and saying that we are not being treated fairly, to then oust the president that we don't, because we were told he's a bad guy, even though, every year historical Black colleges have to go and beg Washington, D.C. for a grant, but he gave them 10 years worth. Every year we complain about what's happened in our jails, and he did prison reform. But those were not things that were shared with that community. In fact, the only thing that was shared with that community is that he was a bad guy. And I find it really weird that the actual oligarchs and the people who made so much money while all the small businesses were shut down were the ones that teamed up with people who considered themselves the protesters and the rioters. I mean, just for me to wrap my head around that and the kind of brainwashing that takes, I mean, kudos to Bernays. Kudos to being able to use certain linguistics to trigger people. I mean, and in just a minute when we move on, I have an example of something that shows how the science community uses lingo to cause a backlash that is absolutely insane.
Oh, well, go ahead.
Okay. So if you remember back to the press conference where Fauci and President Trump were speaking, and Fauci all of a sudden comes up to the podium and says, we've found out that the Black community is affected by the coronavirus far more than any other group. Well, he got a little smirk. Now, I'm not saying he's a bad guy. Well, I'm recounting what actually happened when he did that. He knew that President Trump, very competitive, and B, people had been calling him a racist for quite a while. So, of course, the first thing that Trump did is he got to the microphone. He said, yes, the Black community is affected more than anybody else. So he drilled it in, and he kept drilling it in because he wanted to make sure people knew that, he cared about the Black community, and you could see it. But I that stuck out to me. And then I figured out why after it all played out. So you had Fauci saying, the Black community is hurt by it. And then Trump saying, oh my goodness, yes. And in a week and a half later, they were going to start opening states in the first, the first level. They weren't opening states like Wyoming and the states that really had 0 cases. They were opening these cities and states that were huge, like Georgia and Minnesota and all these areas that could actually be just opened, and that had large, dense populations. And, at that time, the Black community was just told, and they also opened the places where it was a large population. There's a good concentration of people in the Black community. And almost immediately, you heard a lot of people in the Black community being afraid, saying they're going to open up because they want to kill us, because they know we're affected by it the most. And all these businesses are wanting to open up. And, it was very frightening. And I understood why people in the Black community were very nervous about that. And so they started saying things like Governor Kemp is trying to kill people. And, a lot of these places were told by the CDC, you can open up. You can open up in the first way, and they gave all the preconditions and what they needed to do, and all the restaurants were following it. Everyone was going to be following it, and so it triggered this effect in the Black community. And then soon after that, it started to die down. And right after, everyone started to get acclimated, well, if you're worried about it, just don't go out. Stay home. You're still going to be able to work from home, go to school from home. But those businesses that need to open up, let them open up. It didn't trigger the effect I think they were looking for. in the manner, in the like ferocity that they wanted. So after about a week and a half of calm, all of a sudden, George Floyd happened. And it was on TV 24/7, 7 days a week, 24/7, 7 days a week. And it caused the triggering effect of, oh my gosh, first they're trying to kill us with coronavirus. Now they're trying to kill us no matter what we do. We have to protest and get on the street, which in fact made their people in their community more vulnerable, because you had kids out on the street and everyone out there that were then going to be taking it home where grandma was going to get infected. But the triggering effect had already hit and had already caused a lot of issues and consternation at that point. And, those are the, it's like the redirection of the narrative. So there's always the hidden hand that no matter what power struggle there is between the political class and between the science community, between corporations, which each in the intelligence communities or the military industrial complex, everyone's doing their struggle for who's going to be in control of the power structure. That's where the hidden hands can come in at any moment and do the where they redirect the narrative just by simple things that they know are going to trigger certain people. So each group of people has a certain trigger. And after I saw that, I was like, they used the vulnerability of Trump being very competitive, but his vulnerability of wanting to prove he wasn't racist by jumping on top of the narrative that the Black community was affected much more, instead of sitting down with them and making sure that that was a fact, and doing it in a proper manner that didn't cause for there to be panic and undue division. And so after watching that, and seeing how it does over and over, it opened my eyes to how powerful linguistics are, and how swapping the narrative and really pushing an agenda. And as soon as it starts to hit a roadblock, or people start to understand, hey, wait a minute, don't we get a say? Then an emergency pops up, or something that will emotionally get us overwrought with like concern, and we're searching for answers. And then that's when disinformation and the Smith-Mont Act can be used in a way to really cloud everything that's going on, and to push forward with what they intended to do, a while back.
Yeah. How about just more specifically, as regards to the shooting itself?
Yes.
Your family has put it in the past. The kids dealt with it. It's over. Is that the way it is pretty much at the Connor household?
The kids are little boys. They're pretty resilient. The night that it happened, they were on the ground. One of them had gas, and so they were laughing about it, and they were like army crawling like that. So I knew that minute, okay, they were fine, but I needed to concentrate more on security, looking on the security cameras, getting that footage to not only our officers, but getting it out to the public. So I let the group that I run know, hey, this is what just happened. And some people knew, oh yeah, she's been working on voter fraud, because people got mad at me when I was doing the same thing in 2016 and 17 concerning the mayoral race. And so, I was used to like the snarkiness, and people have been frustrated with me when it comes to talking about crime and issues, and how our judges are legislating from the bench, and the issues that we see with gentrification and corporate welfare that comes in and causes a lot of the crime, as well as people pushing for open borders because they want drugs to come in because they like having their social drug, but not understanding that it's actually destroying the community that they say they care about. So you can't really talk out of both sides of your mouth when you're part of a liberal mind frame. You have to understand that having a border wall, it actually protects these poorer communities that you say you want to help, because then you don't have it flooded with, fentanyl and crack and meth and these things that really devastate the communities that you say you really care about. So these are the things that I've always been outspoken about. And when the shooting happened, of course, there was, I got sympathy from friends, and a local news station came to, I did a Zoom call with them to interview me. They attributed it to me being outspoken about crime, because I've spoken at City Hall about a lot of issues, but they left it open-ended because they themselves knew that I had been being pretty verbal about what I saw go wrong in Georgia concerning the election. But one thing that everyone in Georgia knows is that that are familiar with me, they know I'm fair, and that for me, it's not about left or right. It's about right or wrong. It's not about who I want to win. It's about were voters disenfranchised. It's about the voters' voice being heard, not those who have a predetermined idea or they'll monetarily benefit from who's in office. It's really just about each person getting a vote, and that was very much. That's always going to be very important to me, and I'm sure I'm going to upset people on both sides of the aisle, but that's inconsequential. I really don't care, because we should all put party behind voter integrity. That should be the most important thing, because many people, many of our ancestors and many people have fought for a very long time to have the right to vote, and it's a very serious thing, not to be taken lightly or juggled around or maneuvered or manipulated because of a power struggle between those who tend to not go without. And I think that for people who fall on the scale of there's not much to look forward to, or they are hard workers, their vote is so much more important, because they're not going to galas and able to look at the height of their investments and know what's going to be the next thing to invest in. They're living paycheck to paycheck, and to make them feel unsure about their vote, or for them to arrive to vote and be told, you already turned in an absentee ballot, and that they didn't, that's unacceptable. And nobody should be okay with it.
Amber Connor, it's such a pleasure to spend an hour with you this morning, and to get to know you a little bit with more depth. My feeling is you present the ideal American citizen, and in the context of family, in the context of your religion, and in the context of your civic duties. You're doing all the right things. And just if we could just have 200 million Amber Connors in our country that all are oriented towards judging from right to wrong, if you can, doing the right thing, and letting the chips fall where they may, we could all get along so much better. The forces you talk about are real, that want to pull us in this direction and that direction, and I think it's a very wise thing to admit at the beginning that both sides, Democrats and Republicans, have cheated in elections in the past. There's people in each party that would cheat if they got the chance right now, and there's no reason for any of us to pretend that our party is all good and their party is all bad. That's one important takeaway from our conversation this morning. I know that that I love Atlanta and I love Georgia, and I spent a number of my childhood summers down there, and I just hope that everyone down in Georgia keeps safe, and that people like you continue to speak up to make this a better country for our children and for our neighbors and for everyone that comes after. Because, as you say many times in our conversation, we're carrying a torch that was passed to us by earlier people who made tremendous sacrifices just so we could be here and have this conversation today.
Yes.
So thank you again, Amber Connor, and I hope you'll be back again with us sometime soon. I like the idea of having a correspondent in the Atlanta area. Will you volunteer if I need some information down there?
Yeah, no problem. I'm not short of opinions, that's for sure.
Well, that's a good thing. And thanks everybody for being with us this morning. It's nearly noon, and we wish you all a great afternoon. Thanks again, Amber, and all the best to you and your family.
Good afternoon, Ospreys. Have a great day.
All right, Ospreys. Here they go.